In this video, we will go through Chapter 1 of one of the classic novels of English literature, Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. In each chapter, we will go through three main parts. First, the storytelling. Second, a brief summary. And finally, the lesson learned from this chapter. Now let's get started. Pip. My first memory is of a churchyard. I was only 7 years old, and I was frightened of the graves that were all around me. My father and mother were buried there. I began to cry. My sobs filled the churchyard. "What's that noise?" cried a terrible voice. A man was hiding behind one of the gravestones. "Keep still, you little devil, or I'll cut your throat." The man came toward me. He was wet and muddy. Leg irons bound his ankles. He limped and shivered and glared and growled. He was an escaped prisoner. All at once, the stranger grabbed me by the chin. "Don't cut my throat, sir," I pleaded. "Tell me your name. Quick, Pip," I said. "Pip, sir." "Show me where you live," said the man. "Point out the place." I pointed to our village. It was about a mile from the church and 20 miles from the sea. Suddenly, the man picked me up and turned me upside down. My pockets were empty except for one piece of bread which fell to the ground. Then the prisoner sat me on a gravestone. He tore into the bread like a starving animal. "Boy," he said between bites, "where's your mother?" "There, sir," I said, pointing to the gravestone over the man's shoulder. The man was terrified. He thought my mother was standing behind him. He started to run past me. Then he stopped and quickly looked over his shoulder. "There, sir," I explained timidly. I pointed at the gravestone. "That's my mother, and that's my father lying beside her." "Ha!" he muttered. "Who do you live with, then?" "My sister, sir, Mrs. Joe Gargery, wife of Joe Gargery, the blacksmith, sir." "The blacksmith, eh?" he said. He looked down at his leg irons. Then he limped over to me, grabbed my arms, and tilted me backward. He looked powerfully down into my eyes. I looked helplessly up into his. "Know what a file is?" he demanded. "Yes, sir." "You know what whittles is?" "It's food, sir," I said. "You get me a file," he said, tilting me farther backward. "And you get me whittles, and I'll let you live." I was so weak and scared that I clung to the prisoner with both hands. He let me go and glared at me. "You bring me the file and whittles tonight," he said. "And don't say a word to anyone. If you do, I'll tear your heart and liver out and roast them." The convict frightened me. At that moment, I would have done anything he asked. I promised to bring the items and to keep quiet. Then I fled the churchyard. It was dusk. Over the marsh, the wind and the man's words howled together in my ears. I knew I had to help the convict. If I didn't, he might track me down at Joe's. The only problem was sneaking the food past my sister. She was more than 20 years older than me, and she often lost her temper. If she caught me hiding food, I'd surely be punished. My sister's husband, Joe, was my friend. He stood up for me when he could. But tonight he gave me away when I tried to hide a piece of bread down my pants leg during supper. "I say, Pip, old chap," said Joe. "Stop eating so fast. You couldn't have chewed that bread all the way through. You'll make yourself sick." "What's he done now?" asked my sister, looking up from her plate. "He's going to choke on his food," said Joe. "Pip, if you can cough it up, you should," he said. "It's not good manners, but your health's your health. I shoveled my food down when I was a boy, but not as fast as you. It's a wonder it hasn't killed you." My sister pulled me up by the hair. "You come and be dosed," she ordered. My sister's favorite punishment was a dose of tar water. She gave me a large spoonful. It was a thick, dark, foul-smelling liquid. It tasted like mud. I forced it down without a word. Later that night, while everyone slept, I tiptoed into the kitchen and snuck into the pantry. I grabbed the first thing I saw. It was a pork pie Joe's Uncle Pumblechook had brought for tomorrow's Christmas dinner. Then I took some brandy and a file from Joe's workshop. I ran to the churchyard. I couldn't wait to deliver the supplies and be done with the convict. The convict was happy to see me. I gave him the items he wanted and raced back home. I fell into a fitful sleep, huddled under my blanket. The shrill sound of a file scraping leg irons cut through my dreams. The next day was Christmas. Mr. Hay, Wopsle, the clerk at the church, was dining with us. Joe's Uncle Pumblechook was also there. I sat at the table and worried. Soon my sister would find out that the brandy and the pork pie were gone. Then I would really be in trouble. Dinner went on and on. I began to think I might survive the night. Then my sister said, "I almost forgot, Uncle Pumblechook gave us a pork pie." She went to the pantry to get the pie, but she returned with an empty plate. "Gracious me," she said. "It's gone. The pie is gone." I couldn't stand the guilt another minute. I had to get out of there. I jumped up from the table and threw open the front door. A group of soldiers was standing on our porch. One, the sergeant, held out a pair of handcuffs. "We need a blacksmith to fix these for us," he said. "2 convicts have escaped the hulks. We're going to find them." The hulks were the prison ships moored near the marsh. So there were 2 convicts, not just the one I had helped. Joe fired up the forge and fixed the handcuffs. He wanted to join the hunt. So did Mr. Wopsle and Uncle Pumblechook. We started off across the marshes, climbing up banks and down ditches. I sat high atop Joe's shoulders. I looked through the thick fog, hoping to spot my convict first. I knew he would think I had given him away. He would find me and roast me for sure. Suddenly we heard shouting. The sergeant ran on ahead. Joe put me down and we followed him. My convict was fighting a man who had a long scar across his face. I stood at the edge of the ditch. I wanted my convict to see me. The soldiers broke up the fight and handcuffed the 2 men. As they were led away, my convict looked at me. I shook my head slightly. I was trying to tell him that I had kept my promise. There was no anger, only interest in his eyes. I did not understand the look. Then he turned to the sergeant. "I stole a pork pie and some brandy from the blacksmith's," he said. "We were missing a pie," said Joe. "Remember Pip?" Then he said to my convict, "Whatever you've done, we wouldn't want you to starve. Would we, Pip?" I did not reply. By the light of the torches, I saw the black hulks lying near the muddy shore. The prisoners were rowed to the ship and taken up. The torches were tossed, hissing, into the water. I went home with the memory of that night burned into my brain forever. Young Pip, frightened and alone in a churchyard, meets a desperate convict who demands food and a file. Terrified, Pip sneaks supplies from his home, risking punishment. The next day, as the family prepares to eat, soldiers arrive searching for the convict. When he's caught, the convict unexpectedly takes the blame for the stolen food, sparing Pip from trouble. This tense encounter begins Pip's journey, binding him to the mysterious stranger. This chapter emphasizes compassion and loyalty. Despite his fear, Pip helps the convict, and in return, the convict takes responsibility for the theft, showing his gratitude. The story teaches that even kindness motivated by fear can leave a lasting impact and shape our lives in profound ways. That wraps up Chapter 1 of Great Expectations. Pip's small act of compassion leads his life in an unexpected direction, showing how even the smallest choices can have big impacts. If you enjoyed this breakdown, please like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.